Hi, welcome back. So, after last time the book report was not quite to my liking, I decided to make it a bit different today. Still not the way I would prefer it to be, but I want it more or less to be more focused around the book and not just an idea of the book. So today I wanted to talk a bit about the 1% method. It's a book from James Clear, and I've read it over the February. And well, first I'm going to talk a bit about what was inside the book, what it basically told me, or at least what I remember now about a month after reading this. And then I'm gonna talk shortly about whether or not I would recommend it. So first of all, the book basically describes this idea of getting 1% better every day, and therefore reaching about in a year a 38 times as good life as you currently have if you would basically grow 1% every day, since 1% seems minimal but scales up over time since it's an exponential function. And he basically talks about these tiny habits in your life that make the rounding of your entire being, since you have the main points, but what connects these main points of your life and how you spend these times when you are not actively working on something, this basically describes your character way more than how you deal with these explicit situations that you put yourself into, like your sport. It also matters how long does it take you to start, and what do you do around the sport itself to make it more important in your life. In the beginning, he talks a lot about the effect of this 1% increase every day. Some stories about teams getting better through implementing this optimization rule to get better every day. Since if you're trying to get better every day, you basically always look for something that you can improve. And at the same time, you don't look for big things to improve. You look for tiny things, and these tiny things are supposed to, in the end, make up a big thing, and therefore have a bigger impact. And therefore, he talked about the method of creating a scoreboard in the beginning, where you go ahead and write down all habits you have and give them a plus, 0, or a minus, to basically say whether this individual habit helps you achieve the goal or the life that you want to have, or whether it works against it. For example, I have currently on my table a package of chocolate, and for the goal of living a healthier life, this would basically be a negative habit. I mean, it's not really a habit for me personally, so I wouldn't write it down, but it is something that in this situation right now would be something negative for my bigger goal. And the goal of the scoreboard is basically to sort all your habits and sort them through their effect for a long-term happiness. And then you go ahead and try to minimize these habits with minus, and try to get as many as possible habits in the plus section, or if in the neutral section, since the neutral habits aren't working actively towards your goal, but also aren't working against your goal, and therefore don't make a difference. And this visualization also helps to kind of look whether your overall trend is towards the positive or the negative. If you add everything up and end up with a positive number, all of your habits all together seem to be more working towards your goals than against your goals. And then with these tiny habits, the 1% habits, you basically try to remove a bad habit over a longer period of time. And therefore he also talks about the 4 main points of whether you follow a habit or not. And through this 1% method, you include over time more and more triggers that make these good habits, these attractive habits, become more present in your life than the negative ones. Therefore, the first rule is that the habit has to be obvious. And if a habit has to be obvious, a 1% habit or tiny habit would basically be to lay your sport outfit on the table where you already see it when you wake up, and if you have time in the morning, you can basically see it already and have this trigger. So the first rule with the habit having to be obvious talks about this optical trigger that you get when you see something and are reminded of what you want to do or have to do, and it takes the remembering away, since you don't have to remember that you want to do this and are more going towards seeing it and reacting to it, basically trying to build this. You see it and you do it. Therefore, the habit also has to be attractive, which is the second pillar of a good habit. For a habit to be attractive, it's important that it's not something, even when you see it, when you get the trigger to do it, it's not a big mountain that you have to climb. Basically, a second 1% habit, if your goal is to go running, after the first one, making it obvious, putting your running clothes down for the morning. The second one would be that you don't have the goal to run a marathon today. And you say, no, the second habit is that after changing into my running clothes, I go outside and stretch a bit. Then I'm already outside, I'm already wearing my running outfit, and it's easier to just start running. And another habit following that would basically be to start walking around the street and be like, yeah, I'm just gonna walk the street once up and once down. And then when you're up at the end of the street, it's easier to keep going than it was in the beginning to start running. And therefore you try to many habits that follow each other and in the end make this big habit up. The habit of running consists of multiple tiny habits that in the end lead to this big habit. The habit also has to be easy. That more or less follows into this attractive tiny habit thing, since therefore a pretty good rule is that this tiny habit is not allowed to take more time than 2 minutes. Because everything that you can do in 2 minutes, you can do right now. If there is something, remembering I have to write this onto my list of groceries. And then, it doesn't take more than a minute usually, so you do it right now. And therefore, you stop pushing everything later on back and just start. And this combined with the tiny habits, if each tiny habit just is 2 minutes long, you can basically build a chain of these obvious, attractive and easy habits, since all are obvious, following each other. One trigger that starts one habit, that starts the other habit, and so on, which is also easy and doesn't take more than 2 minutes. It does have low effort to start it, and you pretty surely see this progress, even though just through putting on your clothes and stretching a bit and walking the street up and down, you can stop it there. That isn't the important thing. Your 1% habits are not supposed to be yeah, 1% I walk 100 meters, then I walk another 100 meters, I walk another 100 meters. No, each following habit has to change. That's why it's first putting on these clothes, then stretching, then walking up and down the street. And not walking up this street, then walking this street, then this street. Since then, the habits are just repeating and it's more or less the same habit. And therefore, this effect of this trigger basically goes away and there is no change anymore. So these tiny habits are just to start a big habit. And what makes this important is when you do these tiny habits, you can check them off. You don't have to check off the big habit of running because you just did something towards it. And maybe tomorrow you feel more motivated when you are at the end of your street and see, well, sunny day, I can walk 5 minutes more. I'm not in a hurry today, so I can do this. And it's something you decide in a moment and not plan before. And what's also always important to remember is that going slow is not going backwards. And you always want to keep going into the positive direction. And it's not bad if you go slow, because even if you improve 1% every month, well, it's by far not as much anymore, but you increased a little bit. You didn't reduce what you did, you just improved a tiny bit. And through making this more regularly, you can get these big impacts. But they aren't as important since these tiny habits are to just get us going. And of course, in the end, a habit that we do has to be satisfying. This usually can be done through a reward system when you're ending with your habit to run, or the tinier habit to walk the street up and down ends. The end point is when you're back down. And if you then go say, well, now something relaxing for me is my morning tea, then well, you go ahead and make your tea and have this kind of reward for your action. And this basically gives some form of satisfaction. After we've established all 4 pillars, being the habit that we want to implement, this tiny habit has to be obvious, it has to be attractive, it has to be easy or low effort, and it has to be satisfying. He also mentions contract partners, since it is easier for us to do something if we know that we basically have something to lose. If you go ahead with a friend and both of you say, well, we want to get stronger, or one wants to get stronger, one wants to study. And if you then go ahead, if the one person doesn't study that day, he has to pay you 10 euros or $10. And if you don't work out today, then you have to give him $10. And this gives, first of all, you have a punishment if you don't do your habit, which could be risky depending on the motivational type you are. But it also gives you this additional motivator of not wanting to look bad in front of someone else. This is also not to scare you from making breaks, especially if you train. It's not healthy to train every day, and if you are sick, for example, it is important that you don't train. And basically this contract is supposed to motivate you or a group of people that want to achieve something together, and basically gives you more responsibility for your action. And in the end, he also talked about talents, since especially in competitive sport, most people say, well, I'm not talented, or I don't have a natural gift for running. And there is always to say a talent or a natural gift is not worth more than your consistent effort. If someone is talented in something and puts consistent effort in it, well, he does have a head start, and you might never catch up to it. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, since everyone has their special field, and it is not important to be good at everything or to be the best in something, because in my opinion, you shouldn't just do something to be better than someone else. You should always do it for yourself. And talent is also, most of the time, not some natural gift that someone has. It's just the effort that you don't see that someone else puts in. So even though it might seem like everyone's ahead, just through doing something every day, just through working on it, you can get better. And therefore, it's also something good to kind of document this process, since if you constantly try to improve yourself, you end up feeling like not making any progress, even though you changed a whole lot. In the end, I want to say that in the beginning, I didn't like it as much, because it was really obvious, or it was stating the obvious. It states things that are well known, but it, instead of just this 10-minute YouTube video where you get basically all these informations, you read through stories that he himself experienced or has been told, and he uses the stories to get the reason for these pillars and explains them. In the end, I did end up liking this book. I would say if you're interested in it, yes, you can. Especially for someone just entering this field, I would recommend this book. But for everyone who knows a bit more about this field, it wouldn't be the perfect book. I can't tell you which one is better, since I haven't read many books about habits. This was more or less the first one really dedicated to habits. But for an introduction into the field, it was pretty good. Even though, in my opinion, for the overall topic, these 1% improvements, if people say, well, just through following a 1% improvement every day for a year, you get about 38 times better at the end of the year. Yeah, I get it. Especially big numbers sound really good. They are attracting other people, they are attracting viewers. But it's not like you could measure your life with a clear number, in my opinion. And everyone has to find their own way, but for me, it's just I want to be the best version of myself. I know that I can't jump there. I mean, for sure, I would love to be the perfect person that I can imagine right now, even though if I truly think about it, I don't know what this perfect version of me would be like. I have ideas of what it would be like, but the journey of getting there is mostly what makes this perfect version of you. Because if you just wake up and have a perfect body, well, sure, it's great, but you don't have this feeling of having worked towards it and had the struggle. You don't have the experience to tell others about it. And I think it's a journey that is good to never come to an end, and try to be as good as you can, or trying at least to work towards this good person. And also, you don't always have to work towards it. It is totally okay to have a bad day or a bad week or a bad month. This completely happens. It's entirely normal. And it's just important, which is back from the book in the beginning, the scoreboard. If the overall trend is towards the positive, I feel like this is the perfect way to go. And just try to keep going in the direction you want, and not in the directions others want for you or you dislike yourself, since in the end you have to live with yourself.